taxes have been cut to the lowest levels ever. India has only climbed in the ease of doing business rankings over the last few years. But corporate India still seems to be in a funk. As we look forward to Budget 2020 for an opportunity to press the reset button, bringing back animal spirits in India Inc. will be at the heart of that exercise. According to one report, growth in net fixed assets of private companies has been the worst in nearly 20 years. Corporate tax cuts have not yet resulted in higher investments as was expected. So as we continue our special budget focus on the India development debate, we need to talk about what India Inc. needs to really start bringing in more investments. What can assuage some of the concerns India Inc. has? To speak more on this, I'm joined today by Vikram Kirloskar, President of CII and Vice Chairman Toyota Kirloskar Motors, SK Munjal, Chairman of Hero Corporate Service, and Manish Sabharwal, Chairman and Co-founder of Teamlease. Welcome to all of you and thank you so much for speaking with us today. Mr. Munjal, let me begin with your thoughts on sort of the context that I have laid out. To the ordinary man, to the layman, it may seem that the government is doing everything it can to keep corporates happy. Corporate tax have been cut. There have been more than one gesture on behalf of the finance ministry. And yet investments really aren't picking up. Moreover, we've heard big voices talking about laws that stem from suspicion, over-regulation, and an atmosphere of fear. What really is going on?
So first, I don't think any of these policies are being made or are normally made to make anyone happy. They are made to encourage growth in the economy, because this is the multiplier which creates economic value and jobs for an ongoing sustainable growth in the economy. I think that's important to note, which is why they are not just important, it's actually critical to do what is right by the economy and therefore by the industry. There is clearly a need at this moment. See, in the long term, we are actually in very good shape. The question is exactly what you said about the here and now. And because currently the capacity utilization of lots and lots of business is low, we need to figure out a way to improve and increase demand. As consumption picks up, the utilization picks up, and that's when investment will automatically start to kick in. Because any investment in industry is always calculated on the basis of how quickly it can return and how quickly and how much return or a healthy return it can provide to investors of the business. And at this moment, it is clear that we are in a tough spot as an economy. Our revenues are under strain, so it's actually important for the government to figure out how quickly additional revenues can be raised, that's especially the non-tax revenues. Yeah. What expenditures can be held back? Can some of the subsidies be clubbed? Can you target more through using the direct benefit? So there are a number of things at this moment which need to be done. And you also raised an important issue of the trust deficit, which appears to be prevalent right now between industry and government. I think one of the things which could be done for that is to take away this feeling of everything that you do in economy, that industry that goes wrong is a criminal offense.
All right, some very interesting views here, and I'm going to start with opening comments around the panel, and then we'll open up the discussion. So if someone wants to comment, just indicate and I'll come to you. Mr. Kirloskar, your opening comments. First, your assessment of the situation as it prevails, where two questions are being asked. If you talk to people outside, the corporate universe, the Aam Aadmi generally says that, if these corporate tax cuts had not taken place, maybe income tax cuts would take place this budget. There's no big, economic logic to it, but it's a general perception. And on the other hand, you hear about how corporate India is also holding back. Why is that happening, and can really a strong message be sent through this budget?
The economy has been growing at 6-7% plus in the last few years. And all of us have made up plans based on that kind of future growth as well. And perhaps because of that, we have excess capacity right now. We have invested a lot over the last few years. now we will not invest until our capacities get reasonably filled up, as the earlier speaker said. Otherwise, we'll just be wasting money. So it's important to understand that first factor. You can't just get investment just like that. But one thing, the Prime Minister and many people have said that there is business changing hands between China and other countries moving around the rest of the world. To get it into India, we have to make India competitive. And I think this tax cut will help in making India competitive, and you will definitely see more investment coming into India, into direct manufacturing and other areas. I'm very confident of that. In our own businesses, we are seeing this happening, where projects would have gone to a different country otherwise. This is one part. Second part, I also feel in the last few years, there's been a lot of structural or reformist changes in the economy. GST has been one. The bankruptcy code has been one. Identification of all the NPAs. A lot of regulation led to perhaps speculation and investment. Typically, if you start looking at regulation for investment or policy for investment versus what the market requires, you could end up with some of this bad loan issues. The projects are, for no fault of yours or whatever, they're not going to take off very well. Also, perhaps we haven't had the kind of old long-term banks like IDBI, which were doing financing for long-term infrastructure projects, and you start using regular banks for that. It's a different kind of a game when you're doing a manufacturing project with gestation of 4-5 years, and an infrastructure project with a gestation of maybe 15 or 20 years. I think this has to be looked at as well. GST has, to my mind, at least to the large industry, has been a game changer. It has certainly improved our efficiencies, and it has ease of doing business has been a major change with GST. For some people who are not used to paying that kind of tax before, it has been very, very difficult. So I think getting India onto let's say a more open economy and more in sync with the rest of the world has created its own set of problems. And we'll have to go through with this.
Right.
I think we have to build confidence in ourselves that we have to go ahead. I expect the government to do little more spending. Maybe we are going to move the fiscal goalposts a little further ahead. It's worth doing it, and try to get the spending to increase and the factories to fill up.
Well, spending to increase and factories to fill up is a big ask. Manish Sabharwal, will it start by increasing demand in general? It's sort of like a vicious cycle right now. Whoever we speak to, you talk to people running businesses, they say, where's the demand? Why should I increase capacities? Then that, of course, impacts job. You're seeing more lower demand. Where do you think the finance minister can start? And is this holding back on investments more of a mindset issue right now, a feeling of sentiment?
I mean, I think there's very little that can be done in the next few days or next few weeks or next few months. I mean, I think we are in the middle of a structural transformation. We have to stay the course. I mean, you've reduced interest rates by 135 basis points, or at least RBI has reduced the repo rate, so cost of money has come down. And frankly, there has been a fiscal stimulus in the last 2 years. It's just been off balance sheet, so we probably have to legitimize it. But if you take the off balance sheet borrowing, we have had a fiscal stimulus. So as with most things, I think, a 3-year plan is not 3 one-year plans, and we'll have to stay the course. But to make India competitive, we do have to, GST and bankruptcy have been important disruptions and important sort of changes, but we do have to complete the agenda with labor reform, with deregulation, and with fixing nationalized banks. I mean, India's labor is handicapped without capital, and our capital is handicapped without labor. And that needs labor reform to happen. We can't expect labor and capital to have the healthy relationship it should with the current labor laws. I think that deregulation, or in my mind, civil service reform is really important. Corporate India faces 57,000 compliances, 3,100 filings. We change 6,000 times a year.
Yeah.
I think that's really hard. So there have been some changes, but we are a hostile habitat, and we have to fix banking. I mean, nationalized banks have got 2.5 lakh crores of new capital in the last 2 years, and their risk-weighted assets are lower than what they were 2 years ago. So at some point, we will have to make all these decisions. The more delay we do in labor reform, in civil service reform, and in banking reform, the longer it will take for us to get back to our trendline growth rate of 8%, which I think India needs.
Well, are these asks that can be done? There has been some attempt, at least on the face of it, of labor reform, where several laws have been put into 4 buckets. But is that even close to enough? Manish?
That hasn't been done yet. It needs to be done. It has been planned, it has been finalized, but it has not been done yet. And yes, that is a beginning, but my sense is labor codes just are a summation of the existing labor laws. We need to review them, but we will take what we get. I don't think labor reform is a bulb that goes on. It's a gentle sunrise, but we need those 4 labor codes, and they are not completed yet.
Right. I'm going to talk about the 3-letter word. And no, it's not GST, it's tax. TAX, and followed by what is often called tax terrorism. Mr. Munjal, let me come to you first. Over the last few months, there has been, a very clear effort, at least I would say, on behalf of the Finance Ministry, to say that we are aware there is an issue here. So we are going to instruct our departments to not indulge in what many corporates and businessmen think of as tax terrorism. On the other hand, there are very steep and difficult targets also set for the taxman. Do you think that there has been any real movement on this, wondering when the taxman will knock, and also on consistency of taxation?
So I think we are between a rock and a hard place. The government needs to raise more revenue, and that it does by raising collection targets of the revenue department. And obviously they go out and make a bigger effort than they were making earlier. And a lot of that is actually by industry seen as being forced. And that's how this word of tax terrorism, etc., goes around. And the moment you start setting targets for collections for individual department, individual collectorates, individuals who are responsible for this, there is every likelihood that they will use any and every tactic and force available to them to reach those targets. So I think we also have to figure out a way for non-tax revenue to be improved, for the government to be able to use, not just do disinvestment more efficiently, because right now if you see, every year we fix an ambitious disinvestment target. By the time the year is coming to a close, we are not at the target because we start late. Right now, if there's a disinvestment target, and by the way, it should be more aggressive than last year, the work should start right away so that you do this through the year. Also, there is a need to use the assets and monetize the assets that are there in government, public sector, railways, defense forces, lots of land assets, buildings underutilized, unutilized. There are many things the government has which it can and should tap as revenue sources to be able to reduce this burden only on collecting tax, because it has lowered corporate taxes, and there is a massive demand right now for lowering of personal tax rates to give more money, liquidity in people's hands to go out and buy, because this is the virtuous cycle that everyone is looking to create. So to be fair to the government, they've actually done a lot. But if you look at how each thing links to the other, there are still things to be done. And as Manish was saying earlier, you brought interest rates down by 135 points, but it's not interest rate, by the way. Only 44 basis points have been transmitted.
Passed through,
135 basis points have not. And similarly, in each of the areas, if you focus, there is actually work to be done, and there is a sense of urgency right now, which is why the budget, which should actually ideally be only a statement of account of the government, becomes a major policy statement day for all of us.
Well, it is a policy statement day. Let's not forget that the last budget in July of 2019 caused, shockwaves that extended through the year. A lot of the last year was spent sort of pulling back what was done. And then setting out new precedents and messages. So, by no doubt, 1st of Feb is a big day. Mr. Kirloskar, you want to come in on, the perspective of tax, and also to add the point that Mr. Munjal and Mr. Sabharwal talked about. A lot has already been done. If you look at it from another perspective, rates have been cut, corporate tax rates have been cut, interest rates have been lowered. The tax man has, on the face of it, been pulled back. Industry has been reached out to, and yet that optimism which is expected is not coming through. Where is the fear coming from?
I think Manish said it takes time for structural reforms to have effect. I totally agree with him. We have to stick to the path, go through these reforms, and I think we will see the result. I think we'll see the result in the, probably perhaps in this year itself. I think towards the second half of the year, financial year, we'll start seeing improvement in revenues and improvement in growth. I'm confident, I'm always confident of the country. But, some more things, the things that I could suggest and, I keep looking at is, I don't know whether it can be done, the Indian cabinet structure, the government structure, the kind of ministries that are there, heavy industry, steel ministry, textile ministry, etc., have been made over the, since the start of independence, since the start of the country. If Mr. Modi looks at himself as a CEO of the country and re-looks at the organization structure of the government and how it is to implement policy and implement growth and implement, fair benefits to the whole population and how everyone can get something out of it, I think it will be worth re-looking at the whole organization of government. The reason I say it is because I see policy in our industry, in the auto industry, we need to run to 10 different ministries and each one is at his own pace in making policy. Policies are getting changed in between, in time which is less than the development cycle of an automobile. And that just doesn't make sense. So, that's part of the reason why the auto industry is in trouble right now, because too many changes in policies in too short a time. It doesn't work. You have to amortize things over 7-8 years. It doesn't work. So I think relook at the way we view the country has to continue.
Yeah.
The reforms have to continue, perhaps just to make the country more policy-driven and more consistent policy-driven. I think that will bring back more manufacturing than anything else.
I'm going to touch upon something which is slightly prickly, but we like to talk about everything on this show. So we must talk about this as well. Statements recently by American investor billionaire George Soros. In fact, a lot of international agencies and bodies focused on India right now, looking at some of the recent policies and the politics around it, and asking the question about whether we've lost focus from the economy. Broadly on that, Mr. Sabharwal, would you hope to see this massive mandate and the intention that has been communicated by the government now actually being implemented on some of the tough reforms that you mentioned, whether it's land, whether it's labor, whether it's ease of doing business in the real sense?
I mean, I don't think it was God's will that it should take 72 years for, 1.3 billion Indians to cross the GDP of 66 million Britishers. We did that last year. And it took us so long because our labor has been handicapped without capital and our capital has been handicapped without labor. And yes, it is time to do the difficult stuff, which is civil service reform, which is to do labor reform, and to get banking, credit to GDP ratio is 50%. So yes, a mandate like which came, we must, in business, sometimes we forget we don't live in an economy, we live in a society. So I think that it would be patronizing for us to say that, politics should only focus on economics. But I do think that, the state that India is at, we can cross Japan, Germany, and France. Those are the three countries a little ahead of us in GDP. China and the US have broken ahead, but China had the same per capita GDP in 1991. And for a long time, we've had the democracy alibi or the coalition alibi, but with this kind of mandate, we do need to make the tough decisions. And if we do, I think India will cross France, Germany, and Japan over the next 5 years.
Well, is it about taking the tough decisions itself? What about Indian industry also stepping up to the plate of being competitive in this new world? Mr. Kirloskar, on both the points that have been asked, has this massive mandate, in a sense, quote unquote, been squandered on issues which have taken the eye off the economy, which right now needs top attention?
Very often when we discuss what should the government do about the economy and industry, my normal answer is, please look after the farmers and the rural people, make sure that they get rich, industry can take care of itself. That is, I think, to me, that's the most important thing. How to get more of the people, the poor people in India, wealthier and become consumers. Regarding industry, government has has some role in making it competitive. It's mainly to do with taxes, perhaps some amount of infrastructure in ports and roads and things, which there's a lot of work going on. But industry has to make itself competitive by improving quality, improving productivity, and improving delivery. These are the three basic things, and we have to do it with a clean environment and using proper safety around our workplace. So this is something for industry to do, and industry should understand, as the market opens up, only the most competitive ones are going to survive. They're going to be able to export. Even in the case in the last 1 or 2 years when we are seeing economic growth slow down, there are many companies who are very competitive who are doing extremely well. And of course, there are companies who are not competitive who have not done so well. So I think being competitive is an issue of what does the management and the company want to do. And they have to take it upon themselves that they want to be competitive and do things right to make it competitive. I think that is also part of our responsibility as citizens. I think the government is pushing through a lot of the hard decisions on structural reform. Manish has talked about many of them. They're going ahead. Sometimes they take longer. We are in a society, not just an economy. I totally agree with that. We have to carry everyone with us when we do this.
Absolutely. Some important remarks there from doyens of Indian industry and people who understand it deeply. I want to thank all of you for joining us on the Big Budget Debate this evening.